Something is collapsing inside Iran right now, and not a single missile has been fired. No explosion, no invasion, no war declaration. Just silence. And that silence is the most dangerous weapon the United States has ever deployed. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you is not a story about bombs or battles. It's a story about how a superpower is dismantling a regime from the inside out, using time, money, and patience as its weapons. And by the end of this video, you will see exactly why Iran is losing a war it doesn't even know how to fight back against. On April 22nd, four things happened simultaneously. Washington extended its ceasefire with Iran. The IRGC opened fire on civilian cargo ships in international waters. 51 nations gathered in London to plan a takeover of the Strait of Hormuz. And Donald Trump posted publicly that Iran is hemorrhaging $500 million every single day. Its military isn't being paid. Its regime is begging for relief. Now here's what no one is telling you. Those four events are not contradictions. They are not chaos. They are the four corners of a single, calculated strategy. And once you understand how they connect, you will never look at this conflict the same way again. If this is the kind of deep analysis that actually explains what's happening in the world, hit that like button right now. It helps us reach more people who are tired of surface-level news coverage. Let's start with the ceasefire, because the entire world misread it. When Washington announced an indefinite extension of the ceasefire on April 22nd, Iranian state media immediately called it a trap, a plot designed to buy time for a surprise attack. Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf called it meaningless. Foreign Minister Arachi accused the U.S. of violating its commitments. And here is the critical detail that every one of those reactions accidentally revealed. They are not angry because the ceasefire gives them time to breathe. They are terrified because the ceasefire is the weapon. Every single day that ceasefire holds, the economic blockade stays in place. Every day the blockade holds, $500 million vanishes from Iranian accounts. Every day those accounts shrink, the calculation of every general, every soldier, every security officer inside the IRGC shifts slightly. And that shift, silent and invisible, is more destabilizing than any airstrike. Trump's post on Truth Social, the one about unpaid soldiers and a regime crying for help, was not a casual social media moment. It was a surgical message delivered directly to the men holding the guns inside Iran, in front of the entire world, asking them one quiet, devastating question. How long will you protect a system that can no longer protect you? Meanwhile, the U.S. Senate rejected, for the fifth consecutive time, a bill to limit Trump's war powers against Iran. The vote was 46-51, not once, not twice, 5 times. While Iran's own officials describe their government as being in a state of severe internal fracture, Washington is moving with unified, unbroken political resolve. Two governments, two completely opposite trajectories, and time is only accelerating the distance between them. To understand why the pressure is hitting so hard, you need to understand what the IRGC actually is, because this is the part that most coverage completely skips. The IRGC is not simply a military force. It is an economic empire wearing a uniform. Through a network of hundreds of front companies and post-revolutionary charitable foundations that quietly became massive business conglomerates, the IRGC controls an estimated 30-50% of Iran's entire GDP. Construction, telecommunications, energy, seaports, the import of essential goods, all of it runs through IRGC-connected entities. And critically, approximately 30-40% of Iran's oil exports flow through IRGC front companies, completely bypassing the official government budget. That is the detail that unlocks everything. The blockade is not a broad economic attack on the Iranian people. It is a precision strike on the IRGC's private financial engine, from 3 directions at once. Port revenues that the IRGC collected directly from passing ships, gone. Oil export revenue through its front companies, zeroed out. Import monopoly profits from essential goods, paralyzed. The Iranian central bank has warned of 180% inflation. President Pezeshkian himself admitted internally that without a ceasefire, the economy could collapse completely within weeks, not months, weeks. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed the U.S. Navy will maintain the blockade under direct presidential orders, and warned that Karg Island, the terminal that handles 90% of Iran's crude oil exports, is approaching full storage capacity. When that happens, Iranian oil wells will have to physically shut down. Since the blockade began, 28 ships have been forced to turn back, and the surveillance network ensuring that number keeps rising operates around the clock without interruption. KC-135 Stratotankers refuel P-8 Poseidons mid-air, creating a continuous 24-hour presence scanning the entire waterway with advanced radar and electro-optical sensors. Not a single ship movement goes unrecorded. This is not military escalation. This is economic strangulation, reinforced by an omnipresent eye that never blinks. And here's what that pressure is doing to the people at the top, because this is where it gets deeply important, and this is what the regime absolutely does not want you to see. Drop a comment below right now. Do you think Iran will accept a deal, or do you think this regime collapses on its own? I want to know what you think. When money stops flowing inside a regime, power doesn't collapse in a military fashion. There are no great battles, no captured cities, no dramatic surrenders. It disintegrates quietly, through internal blame shifting, through factions beginning to quietly calculate whether loyalty to this system or betrayal of it will be more personally beneficial in an increasingly uncertain future. The loyalty of security forces to any government in the world is not maintained by ideology. It is maintained by stable wages, by economic privilege, by the certainty that protecting this system will secure your future and your family's future. When those things disappear, the calculation changes. And right now, the fracture between President Pezeshkian and IRGC Commander Vahidi is the clearest evidence that this calculation is already shifting. Pezeshkian wants a deal. He understands that without a deal, there is no economy, and without an economy, there is no regime. The IRGC under Vahidi wants to hold, because for them, every concession in negotiation is a piece of permanent power stripped away, a piece of the financial empire they spent 4 decades assembling. They would rather face economic ruin than accept an agreement that dismantles everything they built. This is the fracture of what analysts call Iran's dual power system, the parallel structure between elected civilian government and unelected military institutions that has governed Iran for 40 years. That system functioned because both sides had enough resources to maintain their domains. When resources dry up, that balance breaks. And you can see exactly how it breaks by watching what happened on April 22 in the Strait of Hormuz. While Trump was announcing a ceasefire extension, while diplomats were sending signals of cautious openness, the IRGC sent high-speed boats into the strait, approached 2 international container ships without any warning, and opened fire directly on the bridge of both vessels. The UK maritime trade operations confirmed the attack. The captain of one ship reported being approached by an IRGC gunboat and fired upon, causing heavy damage with no prior warning. The 2 vessels, the MSC Francesca and the MSC Epomandas, were seized. A third ship, the Euphoria, was struck in the engine room and left drifting helplessly off the Iranian coast, unable to move, unable to call for rescue, completely at the mercy of the current. Iran justified the seizures by accusing the ships of operating without authorization and violating navigation regulations. The MSC Francesca was given a specific label, links to the Zionist regime, a designation that no international court would ever recognize and that served one purpose only: domestic propaganda, designed to justify military aggression to an Iranian public that is growing increasingly weary of this regime's decisions. But here's the timing detail that exposes exactly what this action was really about. The IRGC did not conduct these seizures before the ceasefire extension was announced. They conducted them immediately after. Because this was not a response to the United States, it was a message sent internally, to Pezeshkian, to Arachi, to every faction within the regime that might be considering compromise. The IRGC was announcing, in the most visible way possible, that they, not the civilian government, control policy at the Strait of Hormuz. That any diplomatic signal from the civilian side can be neutralized by military action within hours. This is exactly what happened on April 17, when Foreign Minister Arachi declared the strait completely open to commercial shipping, and the IRGC overrode that statement within 24 hours by declaring it closed again, erasing the foreign minister's words in front of the entire world. And there is one more detail about the minefields that no one is discussing. Iran admits it has lost track of where its own mines are located. A regime that sets traps and then forgets where its traps are is not a regime in control. It is a regime being controlled by the consequences of its own decisions. Iran cannot reopen the Strait of Hormuz even if it wanted to, not because the United States is blocking it, but because its own minefields are imprisoning it in a situation with no safe exit. White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt put it precisely. Iran has gone from having the strongest navy in the Middle East to behaving like pirates. And the historical irony is almost too complete to believe. Iran spent decades funding Houthi forces and Somali pirate networks to seize international cargo ships as an asymmetric pressure tactic. Today, the IRGC is personally executing that exact same tactic and calling it maritime law enforcement. While the IRGC was seizing container ships to prove its power internally, the United States was doing something the world almost entirely missed. U.S. Central Command released a brief video during the ceasefire with a message that carried no theatrics and needed none. We are re-equipping, adjusting tactics, and no military in the world adapts as fast as we do. P-8 Poseidons continue uninterrupted surveillance flights, refueled mid-air by KC-135 tankers, scanning the full waterway with radar, sonobuoys, and electro-optical sensors that miss nothing. RQ-4 Global Hawks and MQ-4C Tritons maintain ISR coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, loitering for over 30 continuous hours without landing, tracking every remaining IRGC fast attack craft from altitudes no Iranian air defense system can touch. All three variants of the F-35 are present in the region simultaneously. The Air Force A variant from regional bases, the Marine Corps B variant from amphibious assault ships close to the coastline, and the Navy C variant launched from the Carrier Strike Group offshore. 3 independent attack vectors, 3 different launch platforms, all integrated through the Aegis system on Arleigh Burke-class destroyers into a single real-time operational picture. And during the same ceasefire period, U.S. Secretary of the Navy John Phelan was removed from his position with immediate effect. Not a sign of internal chaos, a signal of deliberate command restructuring. When you replace senior leadership mid-conflict, you are not reacting to internal crisis. You are preparing your command apparatus for the next phase. The ceasefire is not a pause, it is a preparation period, and every day it continues, the capability gap between the two sides does not hold steady, it widens. Iran is losing financial resources, losing command unity, and losing the ability to maintain force loyalty. The United States is accumulating intelligence, refining tactics, and restructuring command. 2 trajectories running in opposite directions, with every passing day increasing the distance between them. And then there is the front that could ultimately prove the most consequential of all. Not in the Strait of Hormuz, not in Washington, but in London and Berlin. On April 17th, Britain and France convened an international summit on the Strait of Hormuz. 51 nations participated. The joint statement was unambiguous. Britain and France will co-chair the establishment of a strictly defensive, multinational mission to protect commercial vessels and conduct demining operations when conditions permit following a sustainable ceasefire. London then hosted a 2-day military planning conference with over 30 nations. The United States was not in attendance, and that absence was entirely deliberate. A mission led by Britain and France, joined by 51 nations from across Europe, Asia, and beyond, cannot be framed by Tehran as American imperialism. It cannot be dismissed with the familiar anti-American arguments the Iranian regime has deployed for 4 decades to maintain domestic support. When 51 nations together declare that Iran has no right to unilaterally control an international sea lane, it is no longer a bilateral dispute. It is total diplomatic isolation. Royal Navy divers are already being prepared for the demining campaign, with automated demining robots in development alongside them. Italy has confirmed readiness to deploy 4 warships, including 2 minesweepers. France, Belgium, and the Netherlands have confirmed active demining capabilities ready for deployment. The Pentagon assesses it could take up to 6 months to fully clear the Strait of Mines, even after any agreement is reached. And here is the leverage that Iran cannot escape. It needs this international alliance to reopen its own strait, because it does not know where its own mines are. Tehran cannot refuse to cooperate with the demining mission without accepting that the strait remains closed indefinitely. And every day of closure is another day $500 million continues to evaporate. Simultaneously in Berlin, Reza Pahlavi, son of the former Shah of Iran, and the most visible symbol of the Iranian diaspora movement, met with German lawmakers, the international press, and the Iranian community across Europe with one clear message. The world must not forget that there are millions of Iranians waiting and ready for a different future for their country. The narrative being constructed in European capitals is not about geopolitics, it is about people. This conflict is not the United States against Iran, it is the free world standing alongside the Iranian people against the IRGC. If that narrative takes hold in European capitals, international sympathy for the Tehran regime becomes nearly impossible to sustain. Step back now and look at the full picture. Because what is happening at the Strait of Hormuz is not a collection of disconnected events. It is 4 dynamics converging simultaneously, each one powerful enough on its own, but together forming a pressure system with no clear exit point for Tehran. The economic blockade is eroding the IRGC's financial foundation day by day. not attacking the Iranian people broadly, but targeting the specific revenue streams the regime depends on to maintain force loyalty. The internal fracture is deepening and becoming impossible to hide. The IRGC under Vahidi is progressively absorbing the civilian power structure, and when one branch of power swallows the other, the system does not become stronger. It becomes brittle, easier to break, less capable of adapting to external shock. The 51-nation alliance is dismantling Iran's international legitimacy in a way no single military action could achieve. And the United States is systematically widening the capability gap during every hour of the ceasefire, while Tehran remains frozen, unable to decide, unable to move forward, unable to retreat. There are three scenarios being considered in Tehran right now. Iran accepts core U.S. conditions, abandoning its nuclear program, accepting missile limitations, and reopening the strait. That is the scenario Pezeshkian and Arachi want, and the scenario the IRGC is using every tool available to prevent. The IRGC carries out an internal military coup, removes what remains of the civilian facade, and assumes direct control. A scenario that analysts at the Institute for the Study of War are monitoring with increasing attention because its indicators are becoming harder to ignore. Or the regime continues to delay, refusing to decide, avoiding negotiations, avoiding a coup, until economic pressure reaches a breaking point and the system collapses. Not from a decision, but from accumulated paralysis. The question is no longer whether the pressure is working. That answer is already clear. The question is where the breaking point appears first. In the bank accounts when the IRGC can no longer pay its forces, in the command rooms when generals begin calculating that betrayal is safer than loyalty, or on the streets of Tehran, where Iranians who have been risking everything for years finally determine that this is the moment change stops being a possibility and becomes an inevitability. And every adversary of the United States is watching. China is studying whether an economic blockade combined with military presence and multilateral diplomatic isolation can break a regime without total war. Because if the answer is yes, they need to fundamentally reconsider the long-term sustainability of their own power model. Russia is watching to see whether a network of front companies and sanctions evasion infrastructure can truly survive when targeted with this level of systematic, multi-directional pressure. What is happening at this strait, less than 40 kilometers wide, is not just Iran's story. It is a blueprint. A blueprint for how a modern superpower exerts maximum pressure on an adversary without triggering a world war, combining economic suffocation, permanent military presence, multilateral diplomatic isolation, and the strategic patience of a party that knows with absolute certainty that time is on its side. We analyze this situation daily because this story is moving faster than most people realize, and missing even one development means missing the shift that changes everything. If you want to stay ahead of what's actually happening, not the headlines, not the spin, the real strategy beneath the surface, subscribe right now. We break it down every day in plain language with nothing left out. Share this video with one person who needs to understand what's actually happening in the world right now. And if you've made it this far, you already know this channel is different. Subscribe, because tomorrow's update may be the most important one yet.